This is episode 3 with Cyndi Roberts. Your challenges don't define you. However, how you choose to handle them does. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Laugh at Adversity podcast. I'm your host, Gary Savoy. Having overcome medical trauma, I've made it my mission to uncover all of the secrets to overcoming life's challenges and living a better life. Each week, I will bring you an inspiring person or message. You'll hear from some of the most inspirational people on this planet, including those who have overcome adversity firsthand. My goal is to provide you with everything you need to conquer your challenges and to turn your struggles into strengths. Hey everyone, this interview with Cyndi is full of transformation, hope, and resilience. After spending years in a state of anxiety and depression, and relying on long-term prescriptions and addictions to cope, Cyndi found herself 80 pounds overweight, pre-diabetic, and facing 6 months to live before liver failure. When most people would normally give up, Cyndi decided to take matters into her own hands. Through mindfulness, movement, and meditation, she has completely transformed her life into a happy and healthy one. Now a yoga instructor and meditator, Cyndi teaches the tools she used to heal herself to help others create space and build emotional resilience in their own lives. In this episode, we discussed how spending 12 years on long-term prescriptions impacted her mental and physical health, and how she was able to restore her quality of life. We also talk about how committing to small daily practices changed her life, and why she hated meditation at first. Cyndi also gives us some meditation tips for beginners, and tells us about why we need to befriend our anxiety instead of pushing it away. We also talk about how the pursuit of happiness trap is broken, and how improving emotional resilience has impacted her life and has allowed her to bounce back quicker. We also discuss why loving ourselves allows us to love others more, and why adversity is an opportunity to rise up and take our power back. So without further ado, here's my interview with Cyndi Roberts. Good morning, Cyndi. Welcome to the Laugh at Adversity podcast. I'm really happy to have you on here.
Good morning, Gary. Thank you so much for being here. I'm happy as well. Honored to be a part of this.
Yeah, I'm honored to have you. I think when I came across, your site, I thought your story was very relatable to so many people, because your story, and I'm going to have you go into it in a little bit, but your story started with anxiety and depression in your teenage years, and then you spent a lot of years, bouncing around between doctors and on medication. So I was wondering if you could start off by just kind of explaining a little bit of your journey from your teenage years with dealing with anxiety and depression, and then kind of the span of the medication and the kind of the process that you went through.
Yeah, sure. So, anxiety really started for me when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I started experiencing panic attacks. Not a lot of people, at that time really knew what to call it, or, sort of what I was going through. So I had very little tools to cope with it. I was just trying to, just be a kid. And I enjoyed being outdoors, being active, creating art. So I think I just naturally gravitated toward those things which soothed my anxiety. Fortunately for me, I wasn't, on medication at that point, like so many children are today. So I'm very thankful for that. But then that anxiety continued to grow through, later in childhood and then into my teenage years when, that 17 or 18 time comes for all of us. We have no idea who we are, no idea what we want to be. And then hormones are raging and crazy. And, people are telling us, oh, you're, graduating high school, or, you don't want to graduate high school, but you have to plan your whole life right now. You have to pick what you want to be for the rest of your life. Where do you want to get schooling? And so there was just a lot of pressure. And with that hormone change and with all that anxiety and not being able to manage it, depression really started to set in. And then, like a very, very typical teenager, I turned to drugs to cope. I turned to alcohol because it sort of numbed me. It took away all of this confusion, all of this emotional pain that I was in. So the adults around me, the way of the world for me at that time was you go see a doctor, you get on medication because medication can help with anxiety and depression. So that was sort of the beginning of the end for me, getting on one medication to manage that depression. And no doctor had ever asked, what's your home life like? Have you experienced any trauma? Do you suffer from PTSD? What's your diet like? What's your activity level like? So it wasn't this whole picture of me as a person. It was just this very specific thing. It was the anxiety and the depression defined me. So then being thrown right into talk therapy, right? It was a prescription and talk therapy. Talk therapy never really worked for me because it was like, you go in 50 minutes, you talk about your problems and all the things that are bothering you. If you have trauma, if you have PTSD, most of the times it gets re-triggered and then there's no outlet for it. They're just like, oh, well, your 50 minutes are up. Let's make another appointment. Thanks for the copay.
Right.
So you're expected to shut it off. And for me, because I had the trauma and PTSD, I was still really triggered from it every week, going into it again and again and just carrying that with me. So the doctors, when I would meet with them, were like, oh, well, it sounds like you have bipolar disorder, because I was really racy from the anxiety of life. And then I was very down. So throwing that misdiagnosis of bipolar into it really intensified the mix of prescription drugs that they were giving me. And they were giving me really heavy stuff. And it affected my health greatly, but it was treating side effect after side effect. It was never, what else can we do beside medication to help you feel better? So that just continued for 12 years. I had a sedentary lifestyle. My diet was processed foods, fast foods, lots of soda, lots of candy, lots of comfort foods. Again, back to those addictions because I was in so much emotional pain and it was just reeling. I was in the grips of depression, in the grips of anxiety. And I just had layers and layers of things stifling me, pulling me deeper down into this darkness that I was trapped in. It truly was a time that I created hell in my mind. Every day was hell. And it didn't seem like there was much hope around me of people that overcame it or people willing to help or offer another solution.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point because as you mentioned earlier, there isn't a lot of people out there, I think probably at that time where the solutions were more so medication driven and that you could either take a pill and it should be able to help with what you're going through or maybe the talk therapy. And I think now there are so many other alternative approaches and there are a lot of people that are trying to push the holistic approach and it seems to be showing, significant results. But I do want to know, so that you said 12 years you spent on medication. I just want to know a little bit about how that medication impacted, your physical health and your mental health.
Yeah, and I want to mention too, I'm not anti-prescription, right? I'm not anti-medication because quite frankly, in small doses, these medications can help, right? So if you're dealing with anxiety and, you need to take a Xanax to sort of take the edge off and help you breathe and help you manage your way, that's fine. Or if, say you have a death in the family and it's really hitting you hard and maybe the Zoloft is something, you need short term to, lift you up. That was a very different case than what I was in. I was just on long-term prescription after prescription. And, we're finding out now, it's studies that, these long-term, having us on medication long term, does affect both our mental and our physical health. And personally, for me, mentally, I felt hopeless. I felt absolutely miserable. I was very caught in that victim mode. I felt like, life was just happening to me and that I had absolutely no power over my life. The despair, it was just so consuming. I would regularly think of suicide just so I could escape,
Wow.
the pain that I was feeling. I really didn't want to die. I believe people who, have suicidal thoughts don't ever want to die. They just want to ease the pain that they're feeling. And that's sort of, the one thing we kind of go to because it's that fantasy of relieving the pain. So then for me, because I wanted that pain to stop, I relied on my addiction. So my addictions grew while I was on that prescription medication. And physically, I didn't know how to take care of myself. I was 80 pounds overweight. I had no energy. I was so lethargic. I had constant aches and pains. I was always exhausted. I was actually pre-diabetic. And then ultimately, I was facing liver failure back in 2008. So because of all the addictions, because of all the medication, it was just way too much for my liver.
Wow.
So organ failure, right? The most extreme sort of thing that could happen because of this path that I was living.
Right. Yeah. It was just the cumulative effects of so many years of not only just medication, but like you said, the addictions and trying to find ways to kind of cope with the pain. But in the end, it was actually creating worse problems than you originally had.
Yeah. And, additionally, I was just such an emotional eater and my diet was worse and worse. The foods that I would choose were not nurturing me at all. They were creating, part of the problem. And I had a shopping addiction and, smoking and just, everything affecting not only my mental and physical health, but affecting my relationships and just affecting my quality of life. I was basically like, geez, there has to be something more to life than just feeling miserable and trying to escape all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you were in a really dark place at that point in your life. And
Yes.
so how were you being in such a dark point? How were you able to get yourself out of that? Was there, a specific moment or maybe a series of moments that made you think, hey, maybe there's a different approach that I could take, and maybe there's a way that I can get out of this and get my quality of life back to, a place that I want it to be?
Yeah, so it sort of came back to that question, is there more to life than just feeling miserable, right? And I remember, going to my doctor that prescribed medication, and I remember talking to him and just, I would come in week after week and just say, I feel worse. I feel worse. And it fell on deaf ears and I really wasn't being heard. So I was like, okay, this is Western medicine. Maybe I need to try another avenue. Maybe a naturopathic physician could help me out, right? So I finally was like, okay, this guy isn't listening to me. Instead of going to another psychiatrist, why don't I try an alternative? So naturopathic physician sounded like a good idea. He ran blood work just to see, where I was. And I remember that appointment going into it, and I was so clouded, right? I was still clouded by all this medication and everything. But, the spark of my intuition that told me, wait, there needs to be more to life was the same, place of knowing, of inner wisdom that sat there when the doctor told me that I had about 6 months before my liver would fail. And I just remember taking a deep breath and I was like, oh, well, okay, I've got to get off this medication. Like it wasn't this big, huge bolt of lightning or, it wasn't this huge thing. It wasn't a booming voice. It was a very quiet, loving voice that came deep within. And it was like it was guiding me. And that voice actually guided me through this whole journey. And as I nurtured myself, got reconnected to myself, that voice, that inner knowing that we all have intuition. We all have this place of solution. That really started to grow and it got louder. And I started to listen to it instead of suppressing it. And I always, to this day, I'm just amazed that that voice came through, even with all of my addictions and all of the medications that were clouding me over.
Yeah, that's very interesting and powerful because at your darkest point, you were able to tap into your intuition to basically, find a way out. Do you think that diagnosis of, liver failure within 6 months kind of triggered that intuition to come out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because there was no way I wanted to die. It was like, okay, well, do I want to give in? And do I just want to do what I've been doing? And then have this, this human existence, this human experiment, so to speak, have it over, right? That was one choice. Or the other choice was fighting and listening to that voice and putting in the hard work and finally being dedicated to myself, which I had never done before. I had never, I felt powerless and weak my whole life. I never felt in control. So it was really this turning point for me that was like, well, I really have nothing else to lose. Why don't I try to find that power? Why don't I start listening and see what I'm capable of?
So how did you find that power? I would imagine that transitioning from so many prescriptions to, a more natural approach. I know you do a lot of yoga and meditation now. How are you able to transfer over?
So it was a very gradual, tiny step process. It was literally, again, that commitment to myself, the dedication to my health and sticking with it, right? It wasn't this big one thing or big two things that I had done. It was the commitment to daily practices. It was a little bit here, a little bit there, small step here, small step there. All the times that I would rather sit in front of the TV instead of going out for a walk or working out, it was those pivotal moments that I made a different choice. So I had become so set in my, my bad habits for 30 years, right? So the sedentary lifestyle, the diet choices, the hopelessness, even the mental, the mindset that I had. So when I had those old habits show and that mindset show up, I would make that conscious choice to choose something different because what I had been, practicing before and choosing before was going to lead me right to liver failure. So I needed something new. I needed something different. And I started out small. It wasn't huge stuff. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a 20-minute daily meditation practice and I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. It wasn't at all like that. It was, I hate meditation. I'm going to sit with myself for 3 minutes a day because I deserve it. I deserve to be healthy. And people are always talking about meditation and, how great it is. Well, I don't think it's great. Let me find out. Why is it so great? Right. So I started questioning what people said. I got curious about it. I was like, well, if meditation's working for other people, maybe it'll work for me or maybe it won't. But I never knew until I tried out, and maybe yoga will help me. It helps other people. What's stretching and breathing? Why is that such a big deal? Does that really work? Is that something that'll work for me? So it was just those small steps, and I never put pressure on myself to do this big thing or be this big thing. And I started with meditation with my 3 minutes a day, and I tell you, I hated it. I hated every second of it because my mind was so wild. It was so chaotic. It was so busy. Who wants to sit with that, right? Our society, we teach distractions. We teach escape. We never teach being still and sitting with your discomfort,
Right.
right? But I've learned that's the way through the discomfort. You have to sit with it. You have to breathe with it. You have to let it be there. And then you find out it's not really a big deal.
So how for people that are listening that might be dealing with either anxiety or depression, how do you sit through that discomfort? Like what is the mindset that, especially starting off, because I know when I started with meditation, because it was a huge help for me in my recovery, that I would either fall asleep when I first started, or I couldn't get in like a calm state because, like you mentioned, your mind is everywhere when you first start. So how do you create that focus and try to do, even if it's just 3 minutes, how do you start?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you first set up a space where you're not going to have distractions, right? You're not going to have anybody come in and disturb you. You set your alarm and you get comfortable, right? So you don't have to be in a really, uncomfortable posture. You can sit in a chair. You can even lie down on the floor. Um, you close your eyes and you breathe, right? And that's meditation in a very simple um, explanation. Now, for me, because it was so challenging, because of the nature of my mind, focusing on my breath was absolutely impossible. I'm like, where's my breath? What do you mean? So, using tools like even as simple as feeling the breath on your nostrils, that's a really good one for beginners because that's a good place of um, contact with the air, a good focus of how we can start. The other thing I like to teach is just a simple mantra, or you could call it an affirmation. And what that does is it helps focus the mind. And just silently repeating the word inhale on your inhale and the word exhale on your exhale. And for me, that's really where I started because I went to a meditation class and it was 20 minutes, sit here and focus on your breath. And that was it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Am I doing this wrong? What's everybody else doing? I kept opening my eyes. I was so uncomfortable in my body. And there was that lack of guidance. So really choosing, what works best for you, focusing on the air passing through the nostrils and the affirmation of inhale and exhale is perfectly acceptable too. Essentially, you just want to sit and you want to focus. And then, to address your other, question with, falling asleep and all these sort of things that happen with meditation, those are all a normal part of meditation. And the more you practice, the more those things will reveal themselves, right? So it will start to unfold. But basically, sitting and making that commitment to be there with whatever shows up is where I like to have people start. And just don't judge yourself. Don't judge what's coming up in the mind. We really cultivate the space that we can detach from the mind. And that for me was huge too. Knowing that I'm not my thoughts and then knowing that my thoughts aren't real and that I can question my thoughts. And the longer we meditate, right, we come across these hindrances, these things that really get in the way of our meditation. So we have sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt, and sort of sleeping is where that, sloth comes in. The worry, when we're making our grocery list and then we're like, oh, I need to stop doing that and come back to my breath. Those are the places where meditation starts to work. So we pick our focal point. The mind drifts, we bring the mind back. The mind drifts, we bring it back. It's always that coming back. That's really the importance of the practice. That's really where we start to cultivate a calmness in the mind and then these beautiful layers start to unfold. We see if we're thinking about past or future, right? Am I a person who tends to ruminate and I replay the past and, what mistakes I think I made? And that's a place of depression, right? Or am I a person who worries and anticipates the future and really sets myself up with anxiety? Then we have circular thoughts. We have repetitive thoughts. It's really quite amazing once we start to unravel, our minds. They're full of the same sorts of things. We have the same thoughts. And for me, I was starting to notice those thoughts that brought me into depression. I noticed the thoughts that would spiral my anxiety out of control. Right? It's really amazing. The emotional body and the mind are sort of, going back and forth communicating to each other. So what we think in the mind, we actually feel in the emotional body. And then that's fueled sending thoughts back to the mind, vice versa. So we get in this cycle, right? Thoughts fuel emotions and vice versa. When we meditate, we can sort of sever that connection. Of course, with practice, we start to see that pattern developing. Emotions typically last about 90 seconds when we're not fueling them with thoughts. So we can get to a point where we're feeling intense anxiety, that we can let the anxiety be there. We can even ask what the anxiety has to tell us, right? Because our emotions are actually a guidance system. All things we feel are actually guiding us towards or away something. So we can befriend the anxiety rather than pushing it away. When we push against it, we resist it so hard, that's exhausting, that creates more anxiety. But when we just take that 90 seconds to be with anxiety, it passes. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm a human. This is a normal emotional response.
So it sounds like it's more about getting away from judging ourselves and more just about being self-aware and whatever those emotions that are attached to those thoughts, just to kind of accept them, but also realize that they're only thoughts.
Yes. And it does play into mindfulness, because mindfulness is meditation. And we hear this word, a lot. And essentially, it's the same thing. And what it teaches us is to just sit with and breathe with and make space for things as they are. The mind likes to create stories around the way things should be or should have been. And that's a great source of our suffering. But if we can take that 3 minutes a day, that 5 minutes a day, to just sit with what is and breathe and notice, if you're sitting and you hear a car go by, let yourself hear the car go by, hearing the birds, hearing any other noises that you're with. That's a good point of focus too. I still use that one. And I used that way at the beginning as well, because it gave me a chance to connect with my now, right? What's happening now? So much of what the mind creates is not now. We're waiting to get to a place and then we'll be happy in the future, or, we're replaying the past. So it's really sitting and being rather than doing, rather than trying to achieve, right? So when I started this journey too, I wanted to achieve health and well-being. And that set me up, for a goal. And I was sort of very goal-oriented. But then I had to soften around that at one point because, that goal, I was striving to get there somewhere. And then the closer I got to it, I was like, oh boy, well, what now? And it was, again, just setting myself up for that suffering, that expectation. So coming back, staying with what is, breathing, being in a quiet space, silently repeating that inhale, exhale is really going to set the space for us to have, more emotional resiliency, more connection to ourself. That self-awareness is everything, right? Then we find our purpose. Then we find our power, and our health and well-being.
Right. And I think especially in today's society where we are it's almost anxiety driven just because of all of the distractions that we have, whether it's technology or ads or there also seems to be a lot of addictions as well. And I think being able to create that space and that self-awareness and sit with ourselves just for a few moments, I think that would help us heal in a lot of ways that we currently can't heal.
Yes, I agree completely. And a lot of, the media is sort of geared toward fear
Absolutely.
and the world. There's a lot happening in the world that's uncertain and that's fearful. So, our society, media, what happens? Well, go buy this thing and you're going to feel better. That fear is going to dissipate once you have this stuff. So we get caught in that trap. And then we get caught in, oh, well, I have to have a better job because I have to get more money because I have to get more stuff. Right. So then we're on this pursuit for money and for stuff. And that makes us anxious too, because the system is broken and it's not working in our favor. We can't quite put our finger on it, but we know something's just not quite right. And because we were never taught how to feel safe and settled in our bodies and in ourself and in our mind, we're seeking all of this safety outward, but we're not finding it anywhere. So the first step is really just sitting with yourself. We're feeling anxious because we're disconnected from self. We're bombarded with, as you said, distractions, what everybody else is doing on social media, and just bigger, better, more, busy, right? We're keeping ourselves busy, but it's really slowing down, being quiet, and letting that be okay. Not competing, not striving to get more or to show off. That's really, part of all this anxiety that we're feeling. But resting in the idea that change is really the only certainty we have. Building up that emotional resiliency, then we can flow through life with grace and ease because we're grounded in that space, in that inner wisdom, that we cultivated through our meditation or through our walking or our hobbies or our yoga. And it's different for everyone. So finding what works for you specifically is really going to be your power. Getting curious, trying it all. I've tried every type of meditation and I practiced, for a few months at a time, sometimes 6 months at least, just to get a sense for what really worked for me, what I liked. And I include a whole bunch of styles, even of yoga, of exercise, of meditating, of ways to eat, nutrition. We have to just kind of bit by bit, one thing at a time, try, be curious, and then notice, be aware of how we feel about it. But I will mention too, quieting that noise is really the first step.
So I want to touch upon, you talked about building the emotional resilience. So how has the emotional resilience that you've built up, how has that transitioned into other areas of your life when things don't go right?
So I bounce back a lot quicker. Life isn't so serious. Life just isn't that hard. Life is really meant to be fun. Life is meant to be easy. Sure, we have challenges of life and we have obstacles. But coming back to that idea, we're all humans. We're all in this experience together and we're all struggling. We all have things that we need to overcome. And it's just so beautiful to me because everybody's adversity is different, but we're all challenged together, right? So, for me, it's like, well, let's just be nicer to each other and let's just make life a little simpler. And recently, I actually, in May, my mother passed away. And for me, this has been a very huge opening. It's really just broken me wide open. And I've been working with the fear of dying, the fear of going crazy, the fear of losing
Mm.
control. It triggered a lot of PTSD. So it's this total big explosion for me. And the emotional resiliency that I have built over 8 years of meditating and practicing really allowed me to flow through it, right? So I started to let myself be messy. I have some type A personality traits, right? I, at times, am a perfectionist. And softening around all of those things, letting it be okay that I was feeling a variety of emotions, like letting it be okay that I was confused and that some days I felt like I was falling apart and other days I felt like I had it all together, right? Just giving myself that space helped me bounce back a lot quicker and helped me just be present, sitting with all this discomfort that I'm feeling. And this is the most I've ever felt in my life. But, you know, I can't say it enough. My practices really prepped me for this. This is the big one. And I'm really thankful that I have all of that experience on my side, all of that loving kindness, all of that self love and self care that I can really fall back on. This time is a time for me to nurture myself, right? Instead of getting it from other people or relying on other people to soothe me and make me feel better. I don't need to do that anymore. I can do that for myself. And of course, it is nice to have, my support system around, and they've been huge, helping me through this time. But I don't feel the angst like I used to. I don't feel the separation anxiety or, a lot of that pain that I had in the past. I don't feel like I'm not going to make it through, right? So I trust that I've built up this emotional resiliency. And this time in my life is meant to teach me. It has so many gifts, so many beautiful things that I have been learning about myself and about my spiritual practice and just about life.
How is that emotional resilience that you keep referring to? How is that impacting all of the relationships with the loved ones around you?
Well, that's actually been quite a profound change too, because I'm not beating myself up so much anymore. I'm not beating up the people I love anymore, and because I love myself more, I'm actually loving others more, right? So
Right.
I'm more accepting of myself and my little idiosyncrasies and my imperfections. So I do the same for the people around me. And it's just easier. It's not as demanding. It's a lot funner. It's so much more lighthearted. I don't want to change or fix anyone, right? I let them be as they are. And in those moments, as they are, I see what I love about them. And that love it overwhelms me at times. And I'm like, wow, how could I have never seen this before? But it was all that feeling clouded over of wanting to change or fix them because I was unhappy with myself, essentially. And I wanted to change or fix me. So I had to project that out onto everyone else.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think a lot of, our judgments on others are start internally. There are things that we might be, insecure about or, not too happy with ourselves about. And our negativity seems to stem from our internal feelings about ourselves and we project them on to others.
Absolutely. And other people can only greet us where they greet themselves, right? So if you have a very challenging person in your life who, you know, speaks very cruel to you or makes fun of you or bullies you or puts you down, you know, for me, I started to take a deep breath with that and be like, wow, they talk to themselves that way. That's why they're speaking to me that way. And, you know, I only have to have a short amount of time with them. Imagine what they feel like being around themselves like that all the time.
I
You
know.
know, so we start to get a sense of, wow, well, okay, how do I greet myself? Right? What allowances do I give myself? What space do I give myself? And then tying in, you know, that other question from before, you know, this drive that we put on ourselves so much expectation of getting this or having that or being this or, you know, putting on this front to the world of who we are, but it's really just a mask. It's not real because we're all, you know, kind of not knowing what we're doing in life. It's kind of this big, it really is an experiment and it's really meant to be fun, but we just take it so serious and we've complicated it so much. So when we can start to see that complication and that seriousness and we can lighten up, we can, you know, have that space of self-awareness and self-love and self-acceptance, we just do that for others, and we become a lot happier and a lot nicer because we're not putting that pressure on ourselves to be something we're not. And we may not even want to do that. We just feel pressured from family or friends, right? Their expectations become projected onto us, and we give into that. So that emotional resilience, just caring deeply for yourself, really goes out into those other relationships. And then you'll notice, you know, certain people stick around, other people fall away,
Right.
right? So we just sort of naturally um, remove the toxic people from our life and naturally attract those more nurturing people.
Right. And I think when you start to look at life in the way that you just described, your perspective of everything changes, whether it's the people around you or your job, or the, you know, the car, the house, the things that you're trying to buy and create happiness, everything kind of changes and your perspective shifts and you're able to just create more happiness with the, you know, the small things in life that truly matter.
Yes. And you know, every day is really a gift. Every day that we wake up is a gift. And I've really, you know, I went through this stage in my life when I was healing that I felt really bad about feeling suicidal and just wanting to end my life, right?
Hmm.
And I started noticing that guilt because, you know, just like walking outside and feeling the sunshine or being at the ocean or seeing a tree or meeting with a friend that I really love, like those little simple moments are such joy, but we lose sight of that, right?
Yeah.
So I started taking life for granted. And then I started appreciating this life that I have. And, you know, like so many of us, I have lost so many family members and friends. You know, they've crossed over, they're on the other side, so to speak. And it really, mortality really, you know, I started questioning, well, you know, when is my time going to end? And wow, you know, I've spent this much time on earth already and it hasn't been happy. So what do I need to do to change that? And even if it is those small moments, you know, it's again, you know, it's not a big thing. It's not like quitting your job or picking up and moving. You know, it's a very small, gradual awareness that happens and really making peace with where you are right now in this moment is the perfect place to start.
Right. And I think we talked a lot about the, you know, self-awareness and the meditation and creating that emotional resilience. And I know you have so much more to offer with your yoga practice and how you can incorporate yoga into healing as well. But for people that are listening and would like to connect with you, where can they find you?
So my website is the best place, yogawithcr.com. And on there, you'll find, you know, blogs, you'll find videos. I also have two books for sale, Yoga for Low Back and Hip Health and Yoga for a Peaceful Pregnancy. So those two books are my unique style of yoga. And then for people that are local, they can stop by in my wellness center, Zen Body and Mind in West Hartford, Connecticut.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to get all of those links from you and add them into the show notes so people can reach over and get over to you. So I have two final questions. The first question is, what is your definition of adversity and what does it mean to you?
So my definition of adversity is it's really a chance that we all have to rise up and take our power back. And adversity is a gift. All of my challenges have brought me closer to my purpose and really to that place of unshakable peace and happiness. Everything, the meaning of my life, why I do what I do, the utter joy, the utter peace, the utter contentment, all of those places came from that contrast, really came from that darkness.
Yeah, I think that's a really important perspective to have on adversity, that there is so much to be learned and gained from it. My final question is, what are 3 tips that you could give someone who is going through adversity in their life right now?
Well, I probably have more than 3. Just, keep in mind, everything is temporary, right? Change is the only certain thing we have. And even though it doesn't feel that way right now, like we said earlier, the challenges are here to teach us. Usually the brightest light comes from the darkest places. And we really don't need to put so much pressure on ourselves. There's really no perfect. There's only real, right? So going easy with life, taking that pressure off yourself, and really forgetting about what other people think. That inner wisdom, that inner voice is really what's going to guide you home.
So I just wanted to take a moment to, thank you and acknowledge for everything that you've done, from the situation of overcoming your own struggles with your depression, your anxiety, the substance, the addictions, and also just being a role model for so many people that are dealing with their own situations, and how you're helping people, discover great joys in life through mindfulness and through meditation and through yoga, and just the love that I guess you project, even in this interview, and then all of the people that you work with. So I just wanted to thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, thanks so much, Gary. And thank you to you. You're an inspiration as well.
If you're looking for more information on Cyndi, then make sure you head over to the show notes at laughatadversity.com/3. You can find everything that we discussed, including the links to her website and social media accounts, to get in touch with Cyndi. Also, if you enjoyed this week's episode, then make sure you head over to iTunes or your podcast player and leave a review. This is the easiest way for the show to appear to others and help change their lives.